Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on our, I think it's fifth conversation for our digital literary arts talks, I'm calling them. And we are very pleased, very proud, very happy to have Eugenio Tisselli joining us today. Bienvenido, Eugenio. Hola.
Hello.
Hi, Eugenio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Élika. It's great to be here with you.
Oh, the pleasure is todo nuestro. Élika will do a little introduction and then we'll get right on with some questions for you.
With some questions. Okay, so let's begin. Eugenio Tisselli is a very dear friend of both of us to begin with, but he is also an artist, programmer, and independent researcher. He holds a master's degree in digital arts from the Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, Spain, and has been awarded a PhD by the University of Plymouth. As the director of the Ojo Voz project, he has developed a software platform and a socio-technical methodology for the collaborative creation of community memories in rural and urban contexts. This methodology is currently being applied and expanded within the context of the ICT for Agroecology framework, developed in collaboration with the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. He has presented his artistic work on multiple conferences, festivals, and exhibitions throughout the world. Much of it can be found at motorhueso.net, with several important works such as the MIDI Poet series and his more recent El 27, the 27th, or Amazon, also a favorite of mine, The Gate, La Puerta. Both of them examples of what he calls algorithmic politics. His platform-based research is available at ojovoz.net, and he is currently the director of the ACT program, Art, Science, and Technology program in Mexico, which is focused on the production, research, and dissemination of multi, inter, and transdisciplinary projects. Thank you so much, Eugenio. Hopefully that was, it made justice to all of your work in so many fields, not just digital literary arts, which is what we're I guess, focusing for in this seminar, but also the agroecology dimension, which we'll ask you about. So I think Alex will begin with the questions now.
Yeah, and thank you, Eugenio. Thank you, Élika. This really, I mean, I think this introduction touches upon our questions, really, because we're very interested in the relation that you have within your practice and your practice being in the world, in the earth. So, but where we have been studying in this class, right, mostly your work from a creative perspective. So we're very interested on your creative practice and your career, your trajectory, if you wish. And our students were also shocked by how, and you know, because we talked about this a little bit, you and I, about how you famously announced, right, in 2011, that moment where you were giving everything up, you were not going to be creating electronic literature anymore, but then you returned. So tell us about this. Why did you stop and why did you come back? So thank you for coming back, but tell us a little bit about this story, because I think it has to do with this multifaceted practice that you have.
Yeah, thank you, Élika. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for making a little bit of sense out of my huge mess, which I call my life. Well, when I think about when did I start combining programming and writing, which are my two loves, I would say. Since I was very little, I started programming and I loved it. I fell in love with programming since I was 10, 12. And I also fell in love with writing. So for me, it was really a natural way of combining both things and weaving them together into a practice, which I didn't know exactly how to call back then. I just made programming, and sometimes my programs would produce text, and there would be this relation between writing and programming. And for me, programming actually was a form of writing. So I would say that this is like my way of expressing myself, my means. A painter would use paint, a canvas. A sculptor would use some material and some tools. And for me, it was writing and programming for a long time. So I was working with different aspects of writing and programming. live performances, which I reflected in MIDI Poet, and the creation of a language specific to MIDI Poet, which allowed people to make these sound and image pieces that could be reactive to movement or to MIDI impulses. So I was working with digital literature before knowing that I was doing digital literature. So
before it was cool.
Exactly. Before it was cool, I was cool before.
Too cool for school, really.
Yeah, in fact, I always been with a foot inside and outside academia, you know, but
Yep.
much of my practice has happened as something that is extra to my main work, I could say, which has been for many years teaching and programming, but programming not as a way of expressing myself, but more as a job, basically as a day job. So while I was doing my teaching and my own work with writing and programming, I was also working as a programmer with other artists. And back then, I lived in Barcelona. It was around 2000, 2001. I was collaborating with an artist called Antonio Abad. And one day, he came to me with a mobile phone, with a very sophisticated mobile phone. It was 2002. It was the first mobile phone with a camera that I ever saw. And he said, what if we could send pictures from here, from this phone, to the web directly? And I said, wow, I've never tried that. I've never seen that, but let me try. Let me see if I can find out how to technically do it. So I started working, and after a few weeks, I sent my first picture from a mobile phone to a web page. That was around 2003. And I was very excited. So this little technical thing, which back then was something quite remarkable. Right now, it's something we do many times every day. Nobody's surprised by that, but let's think about 2003. That little technical finding and this little technical issue that was solved made possible a series of projects that I worked, in which I collaborated together with Antonio Abad, in which we put together different people, different groups of people at risk of social exclusion in different parts of the world. And we made these workshops in such a way that these people had access to these phones, and they decided what aspects of their lives they wanted to reflect on a web page, like thinking about a medium, an unfiltered medium through which people at risk of social exclusion could send pictures, voice recordings, audio directly from phones to the web. Back then it was quite revolutionary. Right now we know it's common. But I mention all of this because I began as a collaborator of the project, but this project slowly moved towards the center of my practice. And it became very, very important, even if it was not my project in the sense that I initiated it. As I said, I collaborated with Antonio Abad, but it became really important because it really opened up my eyes and made me reflect about the political implications of technology and the social implications, and how do we use technology, who uses it, who has access to technology, and more importantly, who doesn't have access. And at some point with Antonio Abad, I mean, we worked along during 7 years with groups such as taxi drivers in Mexico City, refugees in the Sahara Desert, motorcycle messengers in Sao Paulo, Nicaraguan immigrants in Costa Rica, many different groups. It was a very heterogeneous project. And at one point, Antonio and I decided to split our paths, but we agreed that I would continue working on that same, let's say, same line of doing workshops with people and using these means as means of building what we call community memories. You could also see it as collaborative writing. So it was 2011, and I had the chance, as part of my PhD, to start a project in Tanzania the original idea of the project was to contact a group of farmers who would use these same tools, mobile phones, a shared web page, to portray the effects of climate change on their fields. So they would be looking at things like droughts or new pests or new diseases or things like that. So I went there. I was working as a group, as part of a group of scientists, social workers. It was a transdisciplinary project. I was the weird artist doing weird things and bringing in this technology, which was already there. The farmers were already using mobile phones. They already knew about the internet back then. And during that first trip, I had also the chance to visit a community which was affected by gold mining. Basically, gold mining is very harmful to water bodies, rivers, lakes, and for many communities, especially in developing regions, regions without infrastructure, these bodies of water are the main source of water for drinking, for animals, for the fields, for everything. And gold mining tends to be very careless in the sense that many substances that are used in extracting the gold normally seep to these bodies of water and contaminate them and make them completely unsuitable for any kind of use, not even plants, not even animals, of course, not humans, right? So when I came in contact with this, when I saw it myself, I was so shocked. Because I also, at that time, I was also starting to think about what was inside our mobile phones, our computers. And I found out that gold is, for example, a very important component of the circuits that make up our computers because it's very malleable, it's a very good conductor of electricity. So I sort of started making these connections, and I looked further. I looked into coltan, and I looked into the conflict minerals, basically tin, tantalum, and tungsten together with gold. These are minerals which, because of the way that they are extracted, are very harmful to the planet, to the communities that are nearby these sites of extraction. And these are the elements that made up the tools that I had used for most of my life. So I was shocked. And that's when I said, I'm going to stop because I don't think it's fair to use these computers, these devices, these technologies to just create and make wonderful or beautiful things. At least they were beautiful to me. I don't know about other people, but they were beautiful to me. Say I cannot, in the name of beauty, in the name of enjoyment, continue to further this destruction, even if I'm not doing this myself. So this was my thinking back then. And I just stopped. I said, I'm not going to do this anymore, and I'm going to be like an evangelist of, and I'm going to spread the message about the minerals and about what is happening in terms of ecology, in terms of society, what has to suffer, what kind of suffering are we deploying just because we want computers. But at some point, I realized this was not very fruitful because just stopping your practice makes you happy, makes you sad, really. And it's not a personal thing. It's not because I was sad. It's also because I wanted my message to be even more powerful. So I was just isolating myself. I was just like cutting my arms and my body and stopping myself from amplifying the very message that I wanted to deliver. So I read, I thought, I talked to many people, and many people told me maybe you're not doing things in the right way. And many people helped me to see that stopping and renouncing technology is probably not the best path, the best path to take. Sorry, my English is a little bit rusty today. And so I found a very interesting theory which helped me a lot. I mean, I'm not really saying that this theory is guiding my thoughts, but it opened up my eyes because as I read Bernard Stiegler, I found out that you could develop this pharmacological attitude towards technology in which you can see technology as a pharmacon, as a substance that, depending on the dose, it can cure you or it can harm you. It can help you to have a better life and make life better for people and beings, human and non-human, around you. But above a certain threshold, it causes a lot of harm, a lot of damage. So that's how I see technology today. That's what allowed me to continue my practice, but not like, okay, so I just continue and that's it. And within my practice, this principle of pharmacology is completely embedded. So how do I do it? It's something, it's not a recipe. You just every day you think about it and you say, what is the right dose? Am I doing too much? Is it right to use, for example, 3 computers and 2 projectors for an installation that I want to make, which is something that I did before. And today I would say probably not. Probably the same kind of thought, the same kind of expression, the same kind of ideas that you want to transmit could be transmitted through simpler means. So it's about austerity in the usage of physical devices. It's about researching a lot and finding out which are the best possible tools, not in the sense of efficiency or in the sense of technologically advanced, but in the sense of respectful with the ecology. So, so making the right choices, doing as little as possible, yet doing something. So this is what happened, and this is how I came back.
That's so great. Thank you. I'm trying to find a good way to connect the second question that we have, because obviously you're talking about the politics of your practice, and I'm trying to bring it into the politics of technology itself. You call some of your works algorithmic politics, for example, and algorithmic poetics, and so on. What would you say is the link between, I guess, the politics of your practice with the politics of your algorithmic works? How do machines do these politics? How do they enact them, and how you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a common friend, which is, I think, very admired by the 3 of us, which is Cristina Rivera Garza. And back then, actually in 2011.
Hola, Cristina.
Hello, Cristina.
We sort of had common friends, and then we had chances of talking together and having some very important conversations. And she made me see that language has politics. It's not about using language to reflect on politics. It's that language itself has politics. And this was one of the conversations that we had back then. And it really also made me see things in a completely different way. So I think about language as my tool, because as I said, my tools are writing and programming. So both involve languages of very different natures, but they are both languages. Language, as I talk to people who are neuroscientists, lately I'm a lot in contact with this kind of people, and also linguists, they say that language is a cognitive capacity. It's not a technology. What is a technology is writing. So how to think writing as a technology and as a political technology? That is a big challenge. And what is happening to politics right now? So let's try to bring these things all together to try to reply to your question. What is happening to politics is very special because we don't know exactly what is happening to politics. We could think that, for example, since the 70s or 80s, last century, neoliberalism started to spread around the world, and the basic dogma of neoliberalism was privatization, which in turn implied that the government, the political sphere that we knew, would start to become smaller and smaller and smaller, the compression of the political sphere in favor of markets. The economy would regulate life. So instead of having politics regulating life, you had the economy. We sort of live there right now. What is happening right now is very complex, and I really don't want to talk about it because I can't. but we still have the market as a big regulator, in the sense that countries can be failing, yet their economies could be thriving, which is a very strange phenomenon. And we see this in many, many countries. What does this do to language? What does this marketization of politics do to language as a technology and as a form of politics? One of the ideas that I have, one of the ideas that are sort of beating inside my practice are the ideas by Franco Berardi, in which language itself, and of course also writing, becomes subjected to the logic of the market, becomes subjected to the logic of economy. So we could also think about this very, very nice theory that Alain Badiou has about language, which is a recent addition to my thinking, and I want to share it with you because I think it's interesting. So let's say that Badiou, he has a theory about language, and he says, well, my drawing is not very good today, but let me just draw and show you. Okay, this is language. It's like something that has limits, okay? And at the two extremes, he draws at one extreme, he draws mathematics, and at the other extreme, he draws poetry. So P, this is the poetry, and this is mathematics. So according to Alain Badiou, language is something that is limited on one side by mathematics and on the other side by politics. By poetry. So what is the difference between mathematics and poetry? Mathematics is precise. Even if I'm describing ambiguity using mathematics, I'm being always precise. So if I draw an equation, this equation cannot be interpreted. It has to be followed because what it says is what it says. It's very similar in that sense to programming languages, because you cannot say, please computer, show me a number between 1 and 10. Well, you can do that, but you cannot say it like I'm saying it. You have to write the commands, you have to follow a syntax, there has to be a grammar, and it has to be precise. If you make a mistake, it doesn't work. With mathematics, it's also non-ambiguous completely. And so according to Badiou, poetry is on the other extreme of the spectrum. So poetry is the explosion of ambiguity. Poetry has no object. Poetry is not describing the world in a precise way. What poetry is doing is working inside language to create this fractal of significations and signifiers and meanings that just sort of grow and grow uncontrollably without this need to be precise and to describe the world precisely. So Badiou says that our daily language is sort of in between poetry and mathematics, because we talk and we are sort of precise, but not so much. We are being sort of precise right now, and yet we can sort of align our understandings, because even if we are not precise, we sort of understand each other. So language, daily language, is somewhere in between. So if language is subjected by the logic of the market, which is very close to the logic of mathematics, also but this is also an illusion, right? Because the market also depends on psychologies and perceptions and whims and very uncontrollable things, on magic, right? But the illusion that we have is that economics is a science and it depends on mathematics. So what happens when our language has to become more and more precise, like mathematics, and is getting further away from poetry? And what happens also when we have to capitalize our language, in the sense that we tweet and we're looking for a lot of likes and a lot of retweets, which could be sort of accumulation of capital, social capital, you call it as you like. So I'm not expressing myself in a way that can be ambiguous and can be like a spark of imaginations and strange and wonderful or scary thoughts. I'm expressing myself in an economic way, in the sense that I'm looking for likes, I'm looking for retweets, and I'm sort of subjecting the totality of human thought, because thought is language, basically. We think in language. We can also think without language, but that's another thing. We mostly think in language. So what happens when language and thought are becoming subjected to these forces of capitalization? So that's what I would say is the essence of algorithmic politics. And that's one of the basic ideas behind the works like El 27, Amazon, and other works. The works I do together with Joanna Moll, IFAPA, the Institute for the Advancement of Popular Automatisms. That's basically the idea, how language becomes subjected by the logic of the market.
Yeah, and thank you for that very interesting answer, really, which it's like I have a bunch of different questions now, but I wanna honor my pact with Élika, and I think
you don't have
it is.
To.
No, but I do want to, because we don't have a lot of time, and I am interested in this. But in a way, what you're saying also is that language somehow creates a relation to life, and it creates a relation to the earth, and it creates a relation to the humans in the earth, and so on, right? I don't want to talk about humanity, because just like mathematics or language or poetry, humanity is also an abstraction, right? So I'm interested in that relation between the conceptual abstractions that also are abstractions, because they help us optimize, monetize, accountabilize, codify, all these other things that escape. And this makes me think a lot about a concept that you're using in your latest works that has to do with Jason Moore's concept of the Capitalocene. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about this concept, why you like it, and how do you see it being enacted in your poetics?
Yeah, I think I like the concept of Capitalocene because it explains a lot better than Anthropocene what is actually happening. No?
I mean, we have Jason coming next week also.
Oh, wow.
We're gonna interview him. I know.
Wow. I want to be, well, I cannot be there, but I'll watch.
You want to be? Do you want to be part of it?
Anyway. No,
you can be.
No,
Come join us on our call. Yeah,
oh my God, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'd love to talk to him, but I think I'm not ready because, I mean, he's a theorist I admire a lot. Wow, capitalism in the web of life. Of course, I think he has done a fantastic work in explaining our current situation. I mean, the official, the name which has gained more currency is Anthropocene, and Anthropocene is becoming as a term more and more popular because it's very widespread. It's basically, I mean, the idea is very simple. It's the sphere of the anthropos, this abstraction of humanity, but the very concreteness of our daily lives, our daily lifestyles, basically. What is feeding into natural systems and changing the face of the biophysical features of this planet, basically. We're hitting this planet because the emissions of CO2, but Anthropocene fails to capture the idea that not all humans are equally responsible for this. So Capitalocene really hits the spot because it really makes us think about who is responsible for this situation. And there have been these theories of when did the current catastrophe, the current ecological collapse began. And Capitalocene would sort of point towards the beginning of capitalism, which happened together with the displacement of farmers in England towards the factories in the towns. So there was this abandonment of the fields, which went into the hands of the tenants, the large landowners, and the peasants, they suddenly found themselves without land, and so they had to go to the cities and work in the factories that were beginning to spread, and because of different technological advancements like the steam engines, well, factories became a big thing and the fields were like a thing of the past. Being a peasant was a thing of the past. But I think that, I mean, I sort of use Capitalocene as a term to understand what's happening. But I like another term a little bit more, but it's a term that has not become very popular. It's Plantationocene. I first heard it from Donna Haraway. She mentioned Plantationocene, making like a reference to the plantation. You know, plantations are these monocultures where just a single crop is cultivated, so diversity is eliminated. For land to grow only a single crop, it has to be exploited in the sense that it has to be, a lot of chemical inputs have to be used, because naturally when you see a field, you see a diversity of plants. But if you only want to grow a certain plant, for example, maize or rice, you have to force the land to do it. Actually, you cannot, it doesn't happen naturally. So you have to put in a lot of chemical fertilizers. You have to put in a lot of chemical pesticides, because a single crop attracts a single pest and a single insect. Sorry, I don't like to talk about pests actually. And it's a big problem if you think about monoculture. But it's also the exploitation of people, and the plantation was the instrument of colonialism. The basic instrument of colonialism was to enslave people and make them work in plantations. That was the basic thing. So Plantationocene really makes a very clear reference that the current ecological catastrophe has to do with the colonization of land and the colonization of other peoples. And that for me is a much more powerful idea than just thinking about capitalism. Okay, it's important. The technologies have also been completely responsible as a second order, let's say, will of the emissions of CO2. I mean, it's humans who emit CO2 through machines, but without the machines, these emissions wouldn't be there, right? But the logic, I always try to go to the roots of what is happening, and the logic of what is happening, I think, is in colonialism. And one thing that is probably not very well known is an event that happened in the 17th century called the Orbis spike, and it's the first recording of actual changes to the global climate made by humans. So it started when the Europeans came to America in 16th century, more or less. They killed around 50 million people, not only through violence, but also through viruses and bacteria and all sorts of diseases. And this sudden, how do you say, the population diminished so suddenly. You can imagine in the lapse of a very short time, 50 million people less. So a lot of fields which were used for agriculture just stood there without being cultivated. So plants grew very quickly. They grew quickly because it was in the tropics. So this sudden vegetal, the growth of vegetal population, the growth of plant population, caused these plants to absorb more CO2, which in turn caused a decrease, a global decrease in temperatures.
Yeah, the little ice age.
The little ice age. So to me, these huge changes that the humans as a species are making to the planet are rooted or are best explained in violence to the land, violence to the people, which I think we can use colonialism to symbolize this sort of violence. And I'm sorry to be talking about these things which are very, very, I don't know, I don't even know what adjective use to use to describe these things. And it looks like I'm speaking about these things very lightly, very like, yeah. I've been thinking about these things a lot, and they really hurt me in the sense that my question, the question I always direct to myself is, in which ways am I also responsible for all of this? Because of course we cannot think about colonialism as something that happened only in the past. It's still happening. So yeah, that was just to say that I like Capitalocene, but I like better Plantationocene, because
Right. I mean, but one could say really, and I think at some point, I don't remember in which of Moore's texts I've read this, right? But I mean, he sees the idea of capital behind all these colonialist projects, you know, imperialist projects, back into sort of the 15th century, right? Because what capital, the idea of capital as an abstraction does, right? Is create this separation between nature and humans as something that are different, and also that allows humanity to be different from a lot of human bodies. And when we do that, right, we can exhaust them, we can exploit them, we can destroy them, and so on. So that idea is at the core, right, of course, exploitation, exhaustion, devastation, extinction, all these horrible things that we're kind of so lightly talking about, but that of course are at the core of this whole project. No, but anyways, I think it's Élika's turn to ask the next happy question.
yeah, let's bring something happy.
It's
I'm afraid.
I mean it's the bridging of these things. I mean, something else that we can, and you've mentioned Donna Haraway already a couple of times, so we see a lot of her thinking in your work. For example, I'm thinking in The Gate, which I already said is really a favorite of mine, and how there we can find a very moving call for collective creation, collective organization, interspecies relationship, language, of course. So I was wondering if you could talk about that. And similarly, I mean, I guess in a mirror situation with your very recently released work in the transformation of food systems, also, you know, how this bridging of, I guess, the technological, the digital, being harnessed for agroecological practices, also as a collective effort, creation, organization, interrelationships, and so on. So kind of just, what can you say about that? What can you share? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I can share a lot of things,
Yes.
but perhaps
Well, that's why you're here.
what I think is that we really need to rethink completely our relationship to other persons, human and non-human persons, and to the earth itself, herself. So what can I do? Very little, because as I said, I'm a programmer, I'm a writer. So from there, I don't think I can transform myself into something else to do the things that I can do, and that's one of the key learnings that I've had these last years, when I just wanted to go out and then change things because everything was broken, and then suddenly I said, well, you can change some things and do that from your position. You don't have to become something else, because you won't be able to become something else. I'm old, basically. Well, not so much, but it's not about age. It's more about what are my affinities, what are my abilities, and recognizing yourself it's not an easy thing. But when you sort of recognize what are your abilities and your affinities, you sort of start from there, because that's what you are, right? So if you start from what you are and where you are, I think there's a lot you can do. So through games such as the Gate, which is a game which contains a lot of writing and a lot of theory, actually, because it's based on my readings of Donna Haraway, but also my readings of Timothy Morton, when he talks about resonating together with other species, human and non-human, especially non-human. I mean, we sort of know if we are sensitive also, we can resonate with other people, with but we still don't know how to resonate with other beings, maybe with the closer ones, the companion species like dogs or cats, for example. But we need to learn to resonate with rocks and rivers and trees and birds and wolves and many other species. So how do we do that? And for me, in the gate, what I wanted to sort of reflect is that we need to learn the language of other things. And there is no common language, and there never will be, and that's a good thing, because I mean, we cannot think of a uniform world in which every being is using the same language. That would be absurd. But we sort of need to learn how to resonate to other languages, how to communicate in such a way that we don't use words necessarily, but we can use sounds and vibrations and very basic things that are in our bodies. So the gate is about learning the languages in some way of other species. And I don't want to give away the ending, because probably some people who will see this talk have not finished the game. But there is also this element of shamanism, in which you actually have to break yourself in order to become something else. And we don't, I was just speaking about not becoming something else, but in a sense, when we resonate with other species, with other beings, we are already becoming something else. And shamanism has this tradition that the apprentice of a shaman has to literally break the body open, and pass through these terrible pains and illness. And if these tests are passed, then this person becomes a shaman. So in a way, it's like an invitation of following this path. It's not like everybody is going to become a shaman. But Eduardo Viveiros de Castro has this very nice definition of what is a shaman. He says it's a cosmic diplomat, the diplomat of the cosmos. And it's in a very literal sense, because in cultures where shamanism is still functional, the shaman has this task of negotiating with the cosmos, that is, with the rest of the beings that inhabit the planet. And for example, if the people need to hunt for an animal, then the shaman will negotiate with the spirit of that animal and say, okay, I need 2 of your species, but what do you need in return? Right? So that is one task of the shaman. And we need to establish also this reciprocal relationship with the other beings that are around us. I mean, I live in a city, so there's not much chance for me to come across animals and negotiate with animals. But I think that's the future in some way or another, negotiating with other species, negotiating with your tomato plants, etc. Right? So that's some of the thinking behind the gate. It's a game which touches these topics, which can be a little bit complex, but uses emojis to make it a little bit lighter, because if we add in too much dark, then you cannot see.
You're just a bummer.
Exactly. And what it really connects to agroecology, which is my other thing which I'm doing right now. I'm very happy right now because here in Mexico City, we are finishing a seminar of art plus agroecology. And I think there are a lot of connections between art and agroecology, because agroecology is not just practicing agriculture with an ecological mindset. That is a part of agroecology, but that's not all. There's a very, very strong cultural component. And in fact, one of the core principles of agroecology is that it's a social movement. It's a cultural movement, it's a political movement through which people can become empowered and establish a different kind of relationship with nature, without having the need to resort to these chemical inputs and these chemical pesticides and these industrial machines that produce food like it was bricks or whatever, right? So agroecology, if you see it in this perspective, has a very strong cultural, human, artistic component, which is precisely what I'm trying to emphasize with this seminar and hopefully in my future practice and the practice together with farmers. We are working on agroecology. So I think these lines of connection, how we feed ourselves, how we relate to the land, how we relate to other species. Maybe, I mean, agroecology is one way of thinking about it, but another way of thinking about it is art. Timothy Morton said art is already ecological thinking. Art already is the invitation to create a pacific, a peaceful coexistence between different objects and beings, and trying to explore the relations that emerge between these different elements. So I do see a lot of potential in art for becoming a new way of ecological thinking and relating differently to Earth and species. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, to be honest, you've been answering all the questions that we have ready for you
in advance.
in advance. It's
I
kind
read
of
them.
like, okay, maybe we
had a
are
spy
spending
there.
too much time together and thinking together because this is, but uh, so kind of going a little bit off that, but still thinking within, you know, the picture that we've been sort of painting through the way that we've been doing things right now, and if we can call it the capitalist theme or plantationist theme, or you know, it's all based on a sort of double logic of exhaustion and extinction on the one hand, and also accumulation of waste, right? And all these things are based on a limited idea of resources that are in the world. You know, we're using, you could call natural resources or human bodies, mineral resources, anything you want, right? You're exhausting them, you're creating waste in a limited earth. So this is bound to end. I mean, this has to end. It has to, right? We may not see it through us, but so you keep thinking then, and you've been explaining to us some possible ways of perhaps thinking about alternative, more livable futures, right? More livable lives, if you want to talk about this, which is like some terms that sort of new, I don't want to say environmentalist, but you know, some new thinking has been approaching this problem, right? And it also touches on the ideas of how, what you just said about how art is ecological thinking. So maybe I want to veer a little bit from these questions that we have and think more particularly to you then about, I'm thinking of your projects, which could be like, in a way, consider activist projects, right? The difference between activism, right, and the practice of art as an action. So what are these, you know, the limits of this, of like an action, an artistic action, and activism? If this makes sense, this question, right? So how can we then help, how can we think through these livable futures of this, you know, situation that it has to exhaust itself? Did that make sense? I mean, I'm totally making this question as I'm going, because really our script was just, again, exhausted because you answered everything. Porque eres un chamán, chamán. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about this?
I would like to add something to that.
Or not?
That Moore also mentions. He says that he kind of identifies this relationship between modes of production and modes of thought, which I think is related to the question that you're making, Alex. So, you know, in the sense of this, you know, livable lives, livable futures, possible futures, and how they are tied to modes of production, including the production of knowledge, the production of art. I don't know if it makes justice to, if it does justice to the longer question that you asked, but I guess that's how I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
No, that's right. That's right.
I'm thinking about it, when you yourself become an activist, and I think that to some extent most of us are already activists, because the political weather that we find out there, it sort of forces us to become activists in some way or another. And of course, we have this image of the activists going out on the street with a sign and protesting and chaining themselves to posts, and which is a very valid form of activism, and I think it's still valuable in these times of interconnectedness and digitality and virtualization. I think it's still important to go out on the streets and protest and put your bodies out there. But we become activists in many different ways. I mean, when you become conscious of a problem and you do something about it and you sort of try to talk to other people about it, then you're already an activist. And this can come to the point where if you really are committed to a cause, then everything you do in your life is a form of activism. But of course you can get burnt out, because you cannot have this mindset, this constant mindset throughout the day, that every single thing that I do has to be coherent with the cause that I'm defending, because then you get tired, you burn out, you renounce to the cause, and that's a bad thing. So one thing that keeps being repeated a lot, and I think there's something interesting there, is if I can dance, it's not my revolution. If I cannot, I mean, in the sense that if it's not combined with play, with playfulness, with joy, with the joy of being together, with being activists together, if we cannot find joy in this activism, then it's not worth it, really. It's not worth fighting for a just world in which we're all very serious and we're all very coherent, but we're not actually having a good time. You know? So at one level, art can be this sort of escape that helps us not to get burnt out, but it can also be a form of cohesion. I mean, especially when art is something that you do together with others. In Oaxaca, for example, one central element of the community is the fiesta. And it's so important. It's a very serious thing. But it's a fiesta, you know, it maybe can last 3 days, and there is a lot of mezcal and a lot of food and dancing and singing, and everybody gets drunk and happy. And of course, there are lots of fights and lots of controversies inside the fiesta. But this fiesta, this playful aspects of life, is so important that you prepare for it throughout the year. And it's something that keeps the community together, because if we're working together, we see an aspect of each other that is serious, that is efficient, but if we play together and we enjoy together, then there is something else that is binding us. So being an artist and an activist, I think that maybe, and probably it's a bold claim, but in order to be a good activist, you also have to be an artist, in the sense that you have to inject some playfulness, you have to inject some togetherness, some I hate the word, but I'll use it, creativity. Creativity in the sense that, okay, I can just write a sign and go out on the street, but if I invent something, a performance, a concert, whatever, even if it's a piece of electronic literature, which serves to sort of start conversations with other people, like the conversation we're having now. I mean, for me, the whole point of making pieces like El 27 or Amazon is actually to have conversations with other people. It's not about publishing a work of electronic literature and becoming part. Yeah, I value this community a lot, but really the most important thing is to have these conversations, because I don't claim to have the truth or nothing like it. It's just like, I have this idea. What do you think, Alex? What do you think, Élika? Maybe, or very surely, you will have other ideas that will enrich me and will sort of become part of my life. So this sort of web of conversations that can be articulated through works of literature, that's what I'm here for the conversations, basically. So for me, that's the way of doing activism. We were talking before the recording started that conversation doesn't seem to work in these times, because people are sort of being driven by irrational motivations, impulses, which are beyond conversation. Either we still believe in conversation and we keep going, even if conversation not always work. We just change our tactics and probably become, we transform our practice in such a way that it becomes more irrational, but in a good way, like connecting to the huge irrationality that's out there in politics and in the economy. in our relationship with the earth? How can we be irrational, but in a way that nurtures relationships with our mutual, which are reciprocal, which are respectful? Maybe we have to break with this logic of being efficient and being economically viable and being successful and having a lot of likes. We just go out there in the world and live in a different way, which has nothing to do with what we're being told, that you have to go out there and make a career for yourself, and you have to work, you have to grind like more than 12 hours a day. For me, art is like the starting point of inventing and creating something different to that. And that is a form of activism also.
Thank you. I think we're going to end on that note.
I think we need to end on that note.
Yeah, so it will be the longest video in the internet.
Oh, I don't mean because of that. I mean because there's no more to say. But what you just said. Thank you so much, Eugenio. This has been like really, I mean, not just a wonderful conversation, but also really encouraging, and like I feel good about all of the horrible. I don't feel good about all of the horrible things that we talk about, but I feel good about thinking about them through everything that you have proposed. That's what I want to say.
I just want to add before Alex, I know you have something to say, but I just wanted to say, Alex and Élika and all of the people who are listening to this, Alex and Élika, the work that you're doing is incredibly important right now. I mean, if there is some hope, I think it starts from here. And I'm just not just being naive and being like, yeah, let's all end in a nice note. I do think that the only hope to establish a different relationship with the world around us begins here, not in the creation of infrastructures, not necessarily in scientific research. I think it begins here with thought and conversation and creativity, I think.
I agree. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Eugenio.
And thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you.
Yeah.